So this was the homework that I had sent to you guys the last time. And so what they wanted to do for this first exercise was they wanted you to look at this first note and use it in its three forms, as a root, as a third, and as a fifth. And then just give the three possibilities between major, minor, and diminished. And so that's easy enough, right? That's not a very nice treble clef, but trust me, it's a treble clef. And so let's put an F there. And so for each one of these, so they wanted 9 examples, right? So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, there's 5, there's 6, there's 7, 8, and 9. And so we're going to use the first one, we're going to use as a root. And so this is easy, so you just kind of do this business like that. This one, let's use that as a third, so you do that. And if somebody has any questions or wants to chime in, go ahead. And so this one we're going to use as a fifth. So let me do this way. I'm going to take it up an octave. Just so I don't have to keep writing ledger lines. So we're going to use it as a fifth. And that means that drops it down this way. But enharmonically it's going to be the same. So now let's just kind of work with the ones in root position. F. So in order for you to actually do this exercise, you should have your circle of fifths written down and next to you to check by key signatures how many sharps and flats we have. And so you should already have had, something actually written down with your circle of fifths and just kind of put it over to the side. Does anybody need for me to go through that? Let me I take it that's a no, but I can't check with you guys when I have the whole things in here. So if anybody needs me to do the circle of fifths, chime in right now and I'll do it. Okay. All right. All right. So, let's just kind of do this thing where we just do major, minor, and diminished. Just going in that. So major, minor, and diminished. And so we'll just kind of look at that. So F major. In the key of F, I would have one flat, it's B flat, and that means that F natural, A natural, C natural is an F major. So that's my major triad. I didn't have to do anything with it. FAC, no problem. To make it a minor, we really want a minor third, but still a perfect fifth distance between the root. So this is not a minor third, this is a major third. So to make it a minor, I lower that. So F, A flat, C natural is my minor triad. And this one, I'm going to have to do the same thing to the third. I still want a minor third, but here I also want to move this guy down by 1 half step. So that means that the distance that I want between these two is also a minor third. So minor third. And right now, in other words, I want a minor third here, but I also want a minor third there. So right now I don't have that. I have a major third between A flat and C, so I have to lower this guy. And that makes that a diminished chord. All right, so I'm done with the F and root position. Got 3 of them. All right, so now the second one, I still want major, minor, and diminished. So let's look at this one. If the F natural is is as a third, and assuming that I want to keep a D natural here, that doesn't work because in D I have 2 sharps. I would have to have that as an F sharp, but the exercise requires for me to have an F natural. So What do I do? Well, then instead of thinking of it as D natural, I have to think of it as a D flat. But the key in D flat, if I look at my thing over here, pretty much everything is flat except for F. And so if I stay in that key signature, then that means that my A must be flat also. So I spell that chord D flat, F, A flat. Okay? Now I have to move to this one. Let me just make absolutely sure that I'm doing this right with my little notes. Because I did that. Yeah. And so for the F to be natural here, then I still have to keep this business over here where this this triad right here, the interval between those has to be a minor third. So if I look and compare this one over here, they're not the same. Being that I can't change the F, I can change the D though. And instead of lowering the F, if I up or raise the D here, then that makes an instant minor third right there. So D natural, F natural, A natural, that's my minor triad. Okay? So if you wanted to, and you wanted to put a courtesy, a courtesy accidental there because you had a flat before, then that cancels it out. That's all right. You can do it that way if you want to, just to make sure. So D natural, F natural, A natural, minor triad. Then the next one is where I would still want that minor third that I had here, which I'm fine with the D natural and the F natural, but then I have to lower the fifth, and it's that guy right there. And so that means D natural, F natural, A flat, diminished. Okay? So that finishes out my second possibility here. And so then what I'm asked is, okay, well, use the F as the fifth, and then see what happens. And so then if I go line, you see how what I did here is that I went space, space, space. So what I want to do here, because I changed octaves and the F ends up on that line, then I need to do line, and just kind of bring it down this way. And that will just spell a triad. And so if I were going to spell that triad right there, I would spell it B, D, F, like that. So B, D, F. So if this is in a root position chord, then in the key of B should have 5 sharps, right? Everything sharp except C, and I'm sorry, except for B and what? So I have to write this down. Sorry. So here's the order of sharps: 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be in B natural, that would be my key signature. So I would have F, C, G, D, A. So in order to keep consistent with that, the B is natural, check, that's B. The D should be D sharp, and then the F should be F sharp. B major triad. All right. From here, it's just easy because all I have to do now is to lower that third, and so it would be B, D natural, F sharp. And now it's even easier: D natural, F natural. And so this is my diminished triad, and this is my minor triad. You see how this is done? So there's a number of ways to actually prepare these. So I'm going to do, let's go ahead and do these.
Okay, I've got to ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay, if F is the key, why would you be not?
Oh, sorry. I just caught what you were going to say. F is the rule. Why did I change the F? Because I'm a total idiot. I shouldn't have, Ellen. That's a great question. I changed the rules. All right, so let's do it this way. That's it. That's it. Thank you for catching that. That's just because I was doing it without looking at my notes. So I can't change that note there. That note stays the same. That note stays the same. That note stays the same. So thank you for doing this. In order for me to keep that, then that can't be a B natural. That has to be a B flat. And if that's the case, then I have to say, okay, well, if I start with a B flat over here, B flat to D is a major third. Check, that's true. D to D to F is a minor third, and that's true. I'm good. I'm good there. Okay. In order to make it a minor, then I kind of invert the intervals. I need a minor third here and a major third here. So I still want to stay with the B flat, making that a D flat and an F natural. Okay? And now if I want to make this a diminished, um, is that true? Yeah. Yes. And so that if I want to make this a diminished interval, then this one is natural the way that it is. In other words, the root would be a B natural, B, D, F natural. So
Okay.
this one checks. This one is absolutely a diminished interval. Okay, Ellen, how am I doing?
I think you're okay.
Good. Uh, all right. Okay. So that's the way to do that puppy. And thank you for reminding me. That's I don't know why my brain went. Oh, I know why. Because I was thinking of key signatures instead of building the triad. Okay. All right. Did everybody get all of this okay? I think the second one was what, a D flat, and so let's just do it the same way. And I'm gonna kick this up an octave. Also, I'm just doing the enharmonic one. I don't know. I don't know if that's what they wanted um, in the exercise or not, but they come out spelled out the same way. So using the D flat as a root, in here I would have D flat F. A flat should be my triad. D flat, F flat, G flat makes it minor. Notice that what I did is that I took the same major triad, and all I did was that I took the third and I just kind of whoop, let it down a bit. And so I'm going to do the same thing with this one. The minor third stays there, and in this case, that A has to become a double flat. So I don't just lower it once, because if I did, I would just end up with a minor triad. I have to lower it twice to get down to a diminished triad. That's where double flats come in, and that's why that note right there is not a G natural. Because if I actually wrote that down in harmonically, that would look like this, which is not the same as that. And so the question from the third row trumpet players is, excuse me, I have an A double flat. Why the hell didn't they just write a G natural? That's the reason, or that's one reason why they don't do that. Okay, in a diminished triad, you have an A double flat. You don't have a G natural. All right, all right. So let me get that puppy out of the way. All right. So now, using it as a third, all right. So the rule is I can't change a third at all. I just have to change the other ones. So if this was a B natural and that was a D flat, that would actually be a major second if you want to call it that. but so I can't really have that. So let's lower it once and see what that interval looks like from a B flat to a D flat. That's still a minor third. That's not going to work. So if I want a major triad out of it, I need to double flat that first one and make a major third out of here. So B double flat, D flat, F flat. So if you actually want to check this one because it ends up with so many damn flats, what you want to do is let's look what I can do is if I just remove one flat from everybody. So let me do this. Let's remove that flat, let's remove that flat, and let's remove that flat. And if I end up with a major triad, I'm good. B flat, D, F. I did. Look how smart we are. Okay? So now if I go back, whoop, naturally it was going to do, I knew it was going to do that. So let's walk that one out. I can't change the D flat. So if I can't do that, and if that's a B natural, that's really a major second. In other words, B natural to a D flat. If you look at it on the piano, that's all you get is you get, the white key and then the next black key up. So it's only a major second. You don't even get a minor third out of that. So at least you know that you have to lower that one once, and then look at what you have. Well, you have B flat and D flat, and that's a minor third. That's still not good enough. Lower it again. B double flat, D flat. That's a major third. Good. Now I have to look at D flat to F. And what happens here is that that if you look without that flat, if this was D to F, that would be cool. In other words, it would be actually a minor third. Did I just do that right? You look at it this way. So B double flat, D flat, and then F. See, that ain't it. You see what that sounds like? Kind of sounds like As the World Turns. So then, if I take the B double flat, which is here. That sounds much better. What that note is, it happens to be an F flat. So I have to lower this note in order for this to be a major triad. Okay? And the way that I checked it was that under normal circumstances, without all of these flats, if I just took the one flat away from everybody, it would look to me to a very a much more familiar triad, which would be a B flat D F triad, and that would be major. So if I want to lower everything to stay consistent with a major, lower that one, lower that one, lower that one, is still a major triad. B double flat, D flat, F flat. Okay. All right. So let's look at the second one here.
Robert.
Yeah.
So if you were unfortunate to run across that written down in a piece of music, what chord would you call that?
That would be a B double flat major chord.
Yeah.
Which is a stupid chord.
Yeah, I mean, can't we throat punch people that do that?
Nobody does it. This is just theoretical.
Yeah, you wouldn't see that in real life, probably.
No, of course not. Because I want to show you something.
You're going to see double flats more as a flatted third for a minor key. That's where you're going to see the double flats.
You might even see it for sevens if you really want to be,
Yeah.
But you don't ever see them in root position. It doesn't make any sense because if you do this, if you take your circle of fifths and keep going, because you can keep going indefinitely. In other words, if you just kind of start when we stopped at the C flat, we'll keep going all the way around, and you'll get double flats, and then you'll get triple flats, and then you'll get. That's just you know, it's kind of ridiculous after a while because we're really talking about all of them being in harmonics. And there's no damn good reason to actually do that. But in terms of theory, if what you're doing is you're looking at the distance what of these intervals and hear them and see what it actually sounds like, then it does make sense. In other words, I would have never thought to drop the root, but this exercise forces you to do that. Do you see? So let's look at this next one, because then that should make it easier. If D flat was the problem before, it shouldn't be now, because now I just lowered it. So this is still, the first interval is still a major second. So if I lower the root, then now I have a minor third here, and then I don't have to do anything to that F, and that comes out as a minor interval. So that would be a B flat minor interval. This would be a B double flat major interval. And so now let's look at this one, which means that the first interval that I have for the minor needs to stay the same. So if I put a B natural in here, that's still not it. I have to lower that. But in this case, I also have to lower the F. So B flat, D flat, F flat becomes a diminished interval. Okay? And that's how you finish that. But, you know, I mean, going back to that question, yeah, it's super, super silly to do it musically. That exercise doesn't turn out musically, but just the idea of putting the pieces together as a puzzle, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth looking at it, even though the end result tends to be really kind of silly. I'm into silliness. So these are going to be my fifths. So once again, I'm going to go line, 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 line through the camera. So now I have to say, okay, well, I need a major chord with a D flat on top. Well, what's the distance between that D flat and that G? Well, that's a tritone. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have to drop that G by a bit. And actually, if you see what I did, here's a G. That's what it sounds like. And here's a D flat. That's what I meant by a tritone. So I knew that I was going to have to lower that to make that into a regular fifth. That's much better. Okay? So I already knew that wasn't going to do it. I can't change my top note. I have to lower the bottom one. And that's the result. Now, if I keep that, now my lower note then is a G flat. Now I just have to build a major triad from that. If my lower note is a G flat, then that forces this one to be a B flat. Why? Because if I don't do that, then it's more than a major third. Okay? So my interval should be then G flat, D flat, or G flat, B flat, D flat. Well, if your fingers are too fat, that's what ends up happening. All right? So it's always good, by the way, to do these exercises next to a keyboard, because you can see what you're doing, and then you can kind of hear what you're doing. That's where I told you, if you get a MIDI keyboard, then that makes sense. All right, that's my major triad, and so then what I should do is use this as my base to figure out these other ones. Okay? And so what I normally do once I figure out my major triad, what I do is that I just kind of impose that triad on everybody else. Let's make everybody else a major triad. All right, so now I have 3 major triads. How do I make a major triad into a minor? I lower the third. How do I make a minor triad into a diminished? I lower the third and I lower the fifth. So this is a quick way to do this exercise. If you just, after you do a couple of them, then you figure out the major, and then you lower the third and lower the third and the fifth. And so you have major, minor, diminished. And that's how you kind of work through all of these chords. Now that you know that trick, then all you have to do is concentrate on making that first one a major triad. The second
Robert?
one, yep.
The D cannot be double flat
Why not?
because that is the one that we have to keep constant.
Let me see. So I have a G flat.
No, the D flat is the note we have to have as a fifth.
Oh, damn it. I did it again.
It's easy to do with this exercise.
Yeah. Sorry. Ellen, why didn't you catch it? You left.
It was Giuseppe's turn.
Thank you. All right, so let me actually start over again. That's the one that I can't change. So then that makes it a little bit. Actually, that makes it quite easier for the rest of them, because then it's that. Then let me look at this. So G. No, I have to lower this one. So G, B flat, D flat. That's it. That's my diminished. Okay. But then in this case, you're not talking about lowering that one. You're talking about upping this one. So it's all relative. Okay. So it should be G natural, B flat, and then D flat. So thanks for catching me on that. I'm not gonna do any more of this particular one because I'm gonna keep doing the same stupid mistake. But that's the idea. What I wanted to let you know is that even though the exercise doesn't require this, this is one of the things that I would sit down. I remember in college for whatever reason, and one of the things that I would do, because they had they had pianos everywhere. They had pianos in every practice room and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that I would do is that I would just kind of randomly just kind of come up with a major chord, minor, diminished, and augmented. And so my fingers just kind of went to the keyboard, and I just kind of wanted to get those sounds in my head. So it's really, really important to have a visual instrument. You can't really do that with a trumpet or a clarinet or a flute or something like that. You can if you know your arpeggios, but I will say that if you do this at a keyboard and you stick with it, it makes those exercises like arpeggios and all that kind of stuff. It makes those a lot easier. And so for me, the base for every triad was the major triad. So as long as I could figure out a major triad, I could always figure out a minor and a diminished, and then an augmented one. Okay, so that's the point of this particular exercise. So you can kind of finish out that exercise on your own. Let me see how I'm doing on time. Oh shoot. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next one, unless somebody actually wants to hear me mess it up again. So exercise number 2. Let me go back to our little exercise sheet. Where were we? So identify the root, the top of triad, and then bring it down a fifth or up a fourth. And I'm guessing it just depends on what clef you're at. Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna do this on this sheet, because what they're wanting you to do is, in this particular example, they would have started with a G minor. In other words, they would have started with the triad, and they would have said, spell it out, G, B flat, D. Okay, and so what is it? Okay, well, it's a G minor one. And so what they want you to do is if it's up here, drop it down. What did they say? Drop it down a fifth. So then you take the G, and you drop it down to, there should be a C. So I'm missing something. Down up a fifth, or it's compound. Let me see. D.
You've got to name the chord, and then they want you to do another chord a fourth up from it.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, but if that's the case, then they want a C chord out of this one.
No, they've already given you this one as G minor.
Right. So let's look at this one then, because I'm not sure that I'm understanding the instructions really well. But so
Well, they
if
spelled out a fifth on the example is what they did on the bass clef. It says
Yeah.
fifth and G.
it's spelled out a fifth.
Yeah.
So in other words, I mean, well, this is the oh yeah, but this is the one that's starting with. I thought that they were starting with this one.
Well, they were. On a G minor, D is a fifth, so they gave you a fifth, the D.
Oh, but instead of putting it up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. All right. Beautiful. It takes me a while to kind of come up with stuff, but I'll get it eventually. Let me see. Can I actually do this on this? So this is a PDF. It should let me do this. Why can't I write on this? It's not letting me write. Ah, I know why. Because I have to hit annotate. All right, so let's look at this one. So this one, if I'm following it correctly, then what they want you to do is go up. They want me to go up a perfect fourth, up a fourth, right? So let's go up a fourth from that note, and that note is what? It's an A. So if I go up a fourth from an A, it's a D. And they want me to stay consistent with the type of triad that this is. So this is A, C sharp, E, which is a major triad. So they want a D major triad, and I construct that as a D, F sharp, A. Am I right? Somebody say yes?
I think you can go up a fourth or a fifth. Basically, we're just naming triads.
It says down a fifth or up a fourth. So I guess it's the same damn thing anyway. Doesn't matter. So A to D, right. But then if you look at this one, then this is not in root position. So in order for you to make heads or tails out of it, you have to figure out that it's a C, C, G, C, E, G triad. So it's a C major triad. But they wanted, I would assume that if you're gonna go down a fourth, that would be starting on a G. So I can start it down on this G if I want to. Sorry, G, B, D. If I'm going to keep it in root position, G, B, D, but it's not. It's in actually first inversion. So I would actually spell it out this way, and G, like that. So it would be spelled out B, D, G. Okay? And then just keeping it in major. Does that make sense? I think I'm doing it right. I think I got the hang of it now. I think. So let's look at this one. This is what? F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. So it's good to actually just, when you do this kind of stuff, go F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. And if you're just going, well, wait a minute, man, that's really a lot of sharps. Well, then, at least theoretically, just in your mind, forget the sharps for a minute and look at it natural. So without the sharps, if it was F, A, C, that would be a major triad. Therefore, if you put F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, that's a major triad. Because all you did was just lifted the whole thing a half step. Okay? So now we're talking about a major triad in root position, starting at an F sharp. Great, so now I go up, let's go up a fifth from F sharp, that gives me a C sharp. C sharp is here. And so if a C natural, if I were going to spell a major triad on C natural, it would be C, E, G. So if I want to spell it out in C sharp, it would be C sharp, E sharp, G sharp. Okay? And so what I'm going to do, just because of time, then that I'm just going to put 3 dots. But that's the whole idea. Transposition is interesting. As a trumpet player, we're asked to transpose music on site when we're reading orchestral pieces, and that's because of the evolution of the instrument. So trumpet players, especially orchestral trumpet players, are used to transposition pretty much on site. Tuba players also do it, but they call it different fingerings. For whatever reason, they don't call it transposition. They just use different fingerings depending on the tubas that they're using. So you might have an F tuba, or an E flat tuba, or a C tuba. And instead of calling it, I'm transposing, they just say, well, these are the fingerings on them, but in reality, they're transposing. Once you figure out the key signature, the relative key signature that you're going to and the one that you're coming from there on, if you read by intervals, then it makes this whole thing a lot easier. And so that the circle of fifths kind of becomes this ingrained thing in your head, and it comes second nature. But the idea behind all of this in music is that you just have to do it over and over again, and that's why they call it a practice. I imagine that. Alright, so I am going to let me erase all of this, otherwise it'll just kind of stay put where it is and just kind of mess with everything else. Because of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next subject. And not just on time, I'm bored to tears. So so we'll keep going with this. We'll come back to this thing next week. And let me see. See if I can stop this for a minute.
Robert?
Yeah.
Can we do actually E as being a diminished chord?
Sure. Okay, so the way that we spell that then is, the spelling for that chord is really E, G, B flat. So we have a minor third here and a minor third there, diminished. So if I was going to spell this chord just for the sake of argument, I would spell it that way. So if I'm going to drop it down a fifth, then or drop it down, yeah, down a fifth, so it would be E, an A is where I need to be. So let's just kind of call that an A here, small enough. All right, so I'm going to do this first, and I'm going to spell it in root position, so that then I can just kind of spell it in first inversion. So let's go A, C, E, and let's make that a diminished chord. From A, if I wanted to make this a major chord, it would be A, C sharp, E natural. A minor chord would be A, C natural, E, and then a diminished chord would be A, C natural, E flat. Okay? So then what I want to do is that instead of putting my A down here, I want to put my A up here. Okay? So if you actually wanted to read it right, the way that it would read in treble clef, let me erase the bottom two. I need a C and an E flat down there. So the way that it would actually read would be C, E flat, A, like that. Okay? Is that what you got, Giuseppe?
Are you going to write the two different names of the chord you wrote?
So this
The sample say is a G major, the first one. This will be written as
no,
what?
this is not G major.
No, I understand that.
So this chord would be spelled out E, G, B flat, but it's in first inversion, so the E goes up here. Okay. So the way that I would spell this one would be in its root position would be A, C, E flat. But
Okay.
since this one is taken out, I have to put this up here, so it would be C, E flat, A.
Robert, I got that one. Look at sample A. Under the first chord, they say G minor.
Uh-huh.
How you
Yeah.
write the E minor diminished on that system?
So
Do you understand my question?
I think that I do. So let me put it this way. So
He's talking about the labeling, so you'd have a little circle next to the
got it. So this would be what did I say? E diminished 6/4. Okay?
Some people would also just put EDIM. So there's two different ways you could do that.
Like that. The 6/4, this is just formal. It's just telling you this first inversion. You don't even need that. If you're using a jazz chord, you don't need to do that. The way that you would see that as a jazz chord is that you would see that E dim /G, and it will tell you that the G is at the bottom. I like this method much better than I like the 6/4. This is way more modern. This is the way that we kind of look at it, and we call them slash chords, but it just tells you that the G's in the bass.
And that'd be a 6, not a 6/4.
Right.
So why wouldn't you be going a fifth down?
Yeah, you're right. It's a 6, not a. Say it again,
Why
Ellen.
wouldn't you be transposing a fifth down rather than you went up a fourth? Why not a fifth down?
I don't really know. I think that I went. The original chord was an E.
It's an E chord, right?
Right.
So when I worked it as, let me see what I did. Actually, I didn't get it. I gave myself a G, so that's not even right. Okay.
It's just the instructions, and they're basically just trying to get you to label different chords. So it's whether it's a fourth or fifth is really inconsequential.
Okay.
But going back, and I just kind of wanted to go back to Giuseppe. Giuseppe, did that answer you?
Yes, you answered the first one. How you labeled the second one?
Okay. So this one ended up being what, EGB. So, oh, that's for the first one. But the first one was then A diminished with first inversion, or A diminished. If I were going to write it this way, A dim with C.
Six. Got it.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll look
Thank
at
you.
jazz chords. Actually, I mean, we have to kind of do this at first. But once we actually look at jazz spelling of the chords, then a lot of this will start kind of snapping a little bit faster, because it really is a very, very simple and effective or efficient way to actually look at a bunch of this stuff. Okay.
Hey, Robert, when it says in the instructions a perfect fifth or its compound, what is meant by compound?
I was trying to wreck my head around that because in this particular case, it didn't make any sense to actually transpose it to anything other than a perfect. It could very well be. One of the things that I thought that they might have meant was to keep it within some kind of key signature, but they really didn't actually. In other words, if this was a G, let's say that was a G sharp, and they actually wanted you to move it down to a C natural or something like that, then that wouldn't be a perfect fifth. But to me, by the fact that they actually put perfect on it, that doesn't mean anything else other than perfect fifth. So I'm not really sure the significance of that one. Okay, I don't think that it meant much. As far as I'm concerned, I think that if we're doing what we did right now, it's significant enough. Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's get to some fun stuff because I'm through with that. That's the boring stuff. By the way, there's some of this that doesn't have to be that boring, but when you get into the woods here, it gets really granular. But it gets, trust me, it gets better. I don't know if you've ever done this, but there are exercises in mathematics that are actually art, and some of them are like math puzzles, and in that way yes, you're doing math, but they turn out to be puzzles, and they're super cool. And I never thought that I would actually, geek out on math, but some of that stuff is really fun, and so you can do that with music too, but you kind of have to learn the 2 + 2 first before you start messing around with all the fun stuff. So, talking about fun stuff, let me go here. And so let's just kind of see how it is that we tell stories. Because the whole thing, to me, the whole idea, or one of the ideas behind music and why it is that people write it, is because it's a form of communication at some point. And everybody says, well, it speaks to you at different levels. It speaks to you in emotional levels. It says music can say things that you can't say in words. I thought about this the other day because when they wanted to, because of what's happening all around us and all of that kind of stuff. And the petition that they had at UT about taking down the fight song because it was racist. So I really thought about this. First of all, you kind of have to understand where I'm coming from, because I personally find the American obsession over racism to be an obsession, and that's because I wasn't born here. I came from a different culture, even though Puerto Rico belongs to the United States. It's not. It's a different culture. And I'm not going to say that there isn't racism in Puerto Rico. There is. But the obsession at which I find that people take that stuff here, it's intriguing to me. And especially when they said that the fight song was racist, I'm going, music is not racist. How could music be racist? And then I kind of started thinking about it. Are they just talking about words? Because words could be racist. But I don't know that a major third is a racist chord or is a racist interval. And so I'm not sure, and as a matter of fact, I'm pretty damn sure that music as a music is devoid of things like that. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't, that you couldn't activate certain feelings in people, but hate is not one of them. And I just don't understand, the focus of, that piece of music is that it can't be. If you want to change it, change the frickin' words. Change them. But don't say that music is racist, because it isn't. It's wrong. Anyway, this is the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. I just wanted to share that with you, because we're going to be talking about a little bit about how it is that composers use music to kind of tell a story. Kind of. And we do that as if I compose music. But they do that, especially masters do this really, really well by not only the intervals or the keys that they use or the melody lines or the themes that they choose, but also by form. Which is really, really, to me, is a pretty interesting little subject. So let's look at what types of music I could spend probably years on on this next topic, and I'm just gonna kind of gloss over it, but I don't want you to think that's simplistic. It's really a complicated issue to try to put into words something that never was meant to be explained in words. If we could explain music into words, then we wouldn't need music. And so, but it's somewhat of a good idea, especially if you're looking for things, and if you're trying to understand your friends that are talking to you over the centuries. I mean, composers that you might be familiar with, who are trying to tell you something over the years, to try to understand what, you know, how it is that they might look at the subject matter. And so naturally, when we're talking about music, we are talking about both kinds. Let me just kind of make sure. And so you know what I mean about both kinds of music, right? That
Country and Western.
Now, what can I get you boys? You thirsty? You hungry? Or are you just driving through? Maybe like a beer or something a little harder? Hey, you know, we happen to make the state's best pepper steak.
No, thank you, ma'am. We may be sucking back a few beers a little later on. We'll be here all night. You see, we're the band.
You are? Oh, gee, that's nice. Hey, Bob, this is the band.
All right. What kind of music do you usually have here?
Oh, we got both kinds. We got country and western.
Jake, are you sure this is the place? Yeah, sure, this is the place.
Okay. So in case you had never seen that movie will tell you a lot about music. If you haven't seen the Blues Brothers, you have to. It's a must. You talk about, music, and especially composers that have actually influenced music, especially in the later part of the 20th century. There's a bunch of people, a bunch of really good people in there. So you need to watch that. So both kinds of music, country and western, that could be a type of music. But we can also type it by historical periods, and we've talked about, at least in Western music, that these periods, and this is when people talk about classical music, they don't really make, when the public usually talks about classical music, they mean all of this. In other words, they're not talking about music from the classical period, they're just talking about music that's played by strings and sung and written by composers that study music and that kind of stuff. So this is what they mean. But when you also look at types of music from different periods, these are the ones that we focus mostly on. In the visual arts, you'll see that between the Baroque and the classical, there's really the Rococo period also. There's really not a whole lot of composers that there are composers that were living during that time, but there's really not something that most people say, that's Rococo. They kind of tell you that's either late Baroque or early classical, and because there's really not that huge difference in music stylistically between the two, and that was a relatively short period. Let me see. I think I should look at the chat thing. For some reason it doesn't.
I just gave you a Rococo composer, CPE Bach, but
Yes, as a matter of all of Bach's sons, and they were contemporaries, but yeah, you're right, especially with CPE because he was one. He was kind of like the Weird Al Yankovic of the. I'm sorry, Mike. But
no, I believe you.
he was funny. He was very inventive.
Yeah.
So he took all the tools that the late Baroque had, and and actually develop new sounds and new techniques and things like that. So he was an interesting voice to hear. You should, if you're interested in that, listen to especially his winds. Well, things for flute and stuff like that were really imaginative. And you're right. When I was saying that whole thing about Rococo, the first one that came to mind was CPE, but really not. How many people, Mike? How many people know about CPE?
No, not many. I know.
You
I'm
know?
smart ass.
Right. So, but not that he wasn't important, but his voice. It's God. What would be a good example? It would be kind of like Julian Lennon. Yeah, he's like, okay. I mean, as a singer, he was good, but he wasn't his dad, right? And so a lot of times, it's what happens. He wasn't JS. So something like that. But really, all of that aside, the idea here is that we can type different types of music by the eras that they come from, and they have different stylistic nuances that just kind of make you perk up and go, yeah, that's from this period. And so if you listen to enough music from one from one of these periods, and you become really familiar with it, and then after a while, then you start hearing individual voices in there that it's kind of like different accents. You start hearing an accent from the Midwest, and then you start saying, "Oh, wait a minute, that's from Illinois. No, that's from Wisconsin." So then you stop calling it it's general, and then you start actually pinpointing it because you've listened to enough of it. And so that's what happens with all of these periods, is that it's worth listening to enough of them that you can actually pick out composers from different ones, because they speak to you through time. This is one of the things that I find unique in music that's really exciting to me, that I can hear somebody talking to me from 400 years ago, and actually say, I get you. Yeah, I can't get any other feedback from them, but I can hear what they're trying to tell me from 400 years ago, and I think that's super cool. Okay, so that's one way to actually type music. Another way, and that's mostly. It's something that was actually experimented with a lot in the late Romantic and especially in the 20th century music, where people started actually moving away from what was called the common practice period, and actually starting looking for different ideas in what we thought about tonality or a tonal home base. To actually start moving away from it, it's kind of like taking the rug out from under you and say, see, this is what no gravity means in music. So that's another way to actually look at it. Music that actually has a tonal home base that is somewhat predictable, that you can kind of say, this is order out of chaos, and more music, versus music that actually purposely moves you away from that. And just kind of makes you wonder kind of where you are. It's kind of like the Matrix type of thing, equivalent to music. So that's another way that people can actually make you question things. From time immemorial, especially in Western music, we have music that was dedicated to prayer, and music that was used by the masses, outside of services and stuff, and we call that sacred versus secular. And so there were composers who actually, through time, that actually wrote for both, and there were others that just dedicated themselves for one or the other. And that's another way to actually convey messages. And then there's this pure music, or what a lot of people call pure music, that is music just for music's sake, versus programmatic music that is music that not makes you but encourages you to think in one direction. I think one of the masters at that was Richard Strauss, because he kind of developed these things that were called tone poems, and they were, you know, it was pretty obvious what he wanted to convey, even though you may not know that it was about Don Quixote, or you might not know that it was about Salome or something like that. But if you had never heard that music before, it certainly went in one direction, and you could tell that he was telling a story with it. And that's more programmatic. Pure music is music that is just written only for the sake of just writing music and just telling a story without telling the listener, I want you to go this way. All I want you to do is just present this thing of beauty that I have for you, and that's why it's called pure music. So these are different types. There are, of course, you know, hundreds of types of music, and especially when you get into genres and stuff like that, you know, jazz and pop and all that kind of stuff. And of course, speaking of pop, there's popular music versus unpopular music. And that's when, you know, when people ask me, well, what kind of music do you play? I play the unpopular type, and that's evidenced by the audiences that I draw with either brass quintets or you know, wind ensembles or and things like that. The music that is popular is the stuff that you kind of hear on the radio that's actually designed to last for almost 3 minutes. It's 2 minutes and 50 seconds usually, and you know, it's actually given to you in those sound bites, quite literally. Unpopular music takes a little bit more listening to it. It requires your attention. So it's what I call unpopular music, but it's just music that requires your attention. And so obviously I like popular music too, but anyway, I think it's unpopular because it requires an effort. But anyway, if you develop or devote that effort, I think that the rewards are really cool. Need to check on time here. So how it is that we know how to tell stories? Well, in literature, there are many ways. There are many packets in which people can actually tell you a plot, like a plot line. Who was it? I think that it was the name of the guy that actually came up with this was Freytag, I think, that came up with the idea that a plot, you know, had an exposition and then a climax and then denouement, and so he didn't come up with this. He actually just kind of gave it names. But what he was referring to, he was actually referring to stories that were even back to the Greeks and stuff. And so so he studied a lot of storytelling, a lot of plays and sagas and stuff like that. And what he actually came up with is that a lot of them, one of the things that they had in common was something like this. It's kind of like Joseph Campbell's idea of the hero's journey. You know, in that good stories and myths and things like that have some kind of sense of a progression that we kind of like, you know, and that sometimes that the fact that they're predictable, it doesn't matter. Imagine the Excalibur formula. How many times has that been used? You know, the King Arthur thing. Wagner used it. J.R. Tolkien used it. I mean, everybody uses that same formula. And imagine how popular it is every single time that everybody uses it. So it hits home because of things, because framing a story in different ways makes sense, and human beings naturally tend to understand the message even though even though they're doing that with words, the overarching feeling of it is not. It can't really be put necessarily into words. In nature, in people that study nature, and especially in mathematics, there's a concept of the golden mean. And that also goes back to the Greeks. I think Aristotle was one that identified it, and there are a lot of people who have actually studied this and has a lot of mathematical implications. But in the arts, it's also been studied, and in architecture in particular, from the Greeks down up to now modern architecture and all of that. A lot of the stories that can be told in art and visual arts and in music can be attributed to people exploiting the golden mean. And what the golden mean usually means is that you can kind of be going. Let me go back a little. If you look at this design here, it makes it look like every time that you tell a story, halfway through the story, there's a climax, and then it takes the rest of the book to get to the denouement. It does not. Most of the time, if you're actually looking at most novels and most epics and things like that, that thing that says climax, that usually falls time-wise. The tempo of a book takes the climax to be about 2/3 of the way into the book, and maybe a little bit over. And then it takes about a third of the book to actually do the falling action and the denouement. So you have the exposition, and then you have all this development and all this good stuff that happens in the middle, and then all of a sudden you get the climax. But then from that moment until the end of the story, it's a little bit shorter than the rest took you there. So it's not that design is not up to scale. So using the golden mean is a better idea of how many. If you actually step back from a lot of these stories and see when the stories actually reach their absolute potential, and then they diminish. A lot of it follows the golden mean, and the cool thing about it is that you can see this in nature all the time. You see it in trees. You see that if you take a trumpet or a violin, and you actually look at the structure of it, it follows that, or a tuba, or a clarinet, or something like that. If you want to look at it through the lens of the golden mean, a lot of things that work well can be you can look at it through this lens, and it's actually pretty cool. It's a really good way to look at it. And in music, especially when you're talking about musical form, it works whether the composer realized that he or she was doing that or not. But it works really well. So, in musical forms, in classical music, we have ways to actually kind of tell stories too. And most of the time, we kind of look at these as schematic. In other words, there's a schema or a schema to them, and we kind of look at them the way that prose does, or poetry. Actually, in poetry, a lot of times you look at rhythm structure and things like that. And in music, you can also see the form of itself has different characteristics, and many of these actually just repeat from time to time. And so one of them, probably one of the most simple ones, is binary form. In other words, you have what's a good example? The example that everybody uses is green sleeves. You know, A. It repeats. B section. And that repeats. So it's AABB. That's binary form. Okay? Very, very useful way to tell a story. Sorry about my singing. But it's a good example. Everybody uses green sleeves because it's a perfect example of this. Another form is ternary. In other words, you have a ABA form where you have one particular theme, and then you have a contrasting theme in the middle, and then you go back and you restate what you had at the beginning. Very simple. Humans know how to lock onto that. It's a very neat little package in which you to tell a story. There's the canonic or the rondo one, which just kind of always goes back, going back to the same idea. A B A C A B A. You know, it kind of has this round looking thing where you always go back to the main idea, and it's actually repeated over and over and over again. And a permutation of that eventually turns into what's called a variation, which is kind of like in music, you see a lot of things that are called like theme and variation. I think my favorite master of this, and even though he didn't tell you in a lot of his symphonies and stuff like that, he didn't tell you it's a theme and variation, but an absolute master at this was Beethoven. He would just take a theme and just present it to you in so many different ways. And it's super cool to actually see and hear him go through all of this as if somebody's telling you, no, this is super cool, but it's not exactly right. Let me put it this way. No, let me put it this way. No, let me put it this way. And each time he offers you something new. Each time that he says something, he says it even better. And that's one of the things that I love about Beethoven, that he just kind of, he doesn't relent. He just kind of gets you there. And so you can kind of see that with any Beethoven symphony. For instance, you think, oh, we're done. Oh, no, we're not. Oh, now we're done. No, we're not. So he has these super long codas, and he don't let you go. He's like, no, we're not done. I'm not done until you get that final bum bum. Oh, and there we go. Got it. So, theme and variations. And then we get to this little bitty here, which is really, technically speaking, is an ABA form, but what happens, that B section is the equivalent to the development section in the Freytag plot thing. In other words, that rising thing where it goes into the climax, because the development, that B section is actually compounded from the A section. So you take the A section, the introduction, and what a composer does in a sonata allegro form is that they'll go through what's called the exposition first. And so they kind of start this idea, and they start with these themes, and some people call them, themes or motifs, as some people call them also. And they kind of tell you, okay, this is what we're going to be talking about. And then they go into this thing where they take that exposition that they had, and they take it apart. And they start twisting it, and they just kind of start squeezing all the musical juice that they possibly can out of it, and just expose it in so many different ways, and creating their own conflict. And then towards the end, they kind of remind you, oh, this is what we did all of that mess. And so there's finally that last little release, and this is a sonata allegro form. And so this, when I mentioned when I mentioned the golden mean, this is kind of like what I meant, because to me that's what the sonata allegro form kind of means in its pure form. So you go through the exposition, go through the development, and then you go through what's called a recapitulation. In other words, capitus is a head. So re means going back to the head, and so that's in jazz terms, going back to the head means, if you're playing a head tune, you go back to the original song that you were playing, and to remind people. So what you do is you tell people what you're going to be talking about. You tell the story, and you take it apart and you look at it under a microscope, and you look at its beauty, and you look at its conflict, and you look at all of that kind of stuff, and then towards the end, there's the little simple answer. See, told you so. You know, so it's kind of like the composer becoming a teacher and giving you a lesson, you know, for free even. Well, no, sometimes you have to pay for a concert, but it's like that. And it's super cool, especially when the person telling you the story is a master at it. So this is what what I wanted to share with you tonight. So we're gonna look at a couple of examples. And so one of the videos that I want to see tonight is a guy that can actually explain sonata allegro form much better than me. So we're gonna watch this video, and then after that, we'll watch one of my favorite examples of a sonata allegro form. So let's look at this video. So this takes about 10 minutes. It's relatively quick.
Sonata form is probably the most important musical form to understand because it comes up everywhere, and I mean everywhere. And that's because it's one of the most brilliant ways of developing your musical ideas in a well-rounded and dramatically effective way. It seems to have developed from binary form, and you can start hearing it from the music of Joseph Haydn onwards. I presume you've seen my videos on musical seeds and tonality. I'll give you a quick overview of sonata form, and then we'll go into a little more detail with a famous example. Sonata form can be divided into three main parts. First, the exposition, which basically presents or exposes all the main themes, all the main musical material and seeds. This is made up of two groups, which will definitely be in contrasting keys, and may also have contrasting themes, moods, or ideas. So that already sets up a kind of conflict, and particularly a conflict of keys, and the exposition is often repeated. Then there's the development, which explores and develops the material we've heard in the exposition. And this is usually more discursive and looser in structure and will move through many keys. And finally, we get a recapitulation, which literally recaps the exposition, but with a twist. Things are the same in some ways, but in other ways crucially different. For example, the first and second group will return, but now both will be in the home key, and so the tonal conflict from the exposition is resolved. The reason that this model is so good is that it gives great space for a compelling musical argument to be developed. An interesting parallel for sonata form is that of a discussion between two people with different points of view. Take Hegel's dialectic. First, we get our thesis or statement. This is like our first group of the exposition, and this gives rise to an antithesis, which contradicts or negates the thesis. This is like our second group, which comes in a contrasting key. And then, through much discussion, dissecting and rebuilding, which is our development, we come to a synthesis, which resolves the tension between the disagreement. This is like our recapitulation. So, you see, the sonata form is a great model for building dramatically engaging pieces of music. In my opinion, the three most exciting points where composers get the opportunity to blow your mind are the development section, the return from the development into the recapitulation, and the second group of the recapitulation, and you'll find out why through the rest of this video. So this is the fundamental sonata form structure, though it is often topped and tailed with an introduction and a coda. The introduction is normally at a slower tempo, and its job is to set the mood for the piece, as well as perhaps hint at some of the melodic material. The coda gives a solid sense of finality to the piece, if the recapitulation hasn't already done so, and the coda might also bring closure to any unanswered questions we might still have about the music. So let's look a little closer, and we'll use Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor as an example. First, the exposition, which is divided into two groups in contrasting keys. What's important to understand is that there are no limits to the number of themes or amount of thematic material that may appear in a group. You may be presented with many musical ideas which will come back later, or there may just be one theme per group. The first and second group can even use the same material. Haydn often uses exactly the same theme in his first and second group, though that's in the very early stages of sonata form. But the thing that always divides them is their key. the first group will always be in the home tonic, while the second group will always be in a contrasting key. Typically, if the first group was in a major key, the second group will be in the dominant key. If the first group was minor, the second group will move to the dominant or the relative major, though things get a little more adventurous as we progress through history. These two groups will often have very contrasting themes or moods, though that's not a necessity for sonata form. However, it can definitely make the drama more interesting. These two groups are normally connected together by a transition passage, which allows the music to transition or bridge from one key to the next, and this transitional material might be memorable or interesting in its own right. So, with Mozart's 40th, the first group in G minor gives us this theme. Then the transition gives us this material and changes key for us. The second group in B flat major gives us this calmer, contrasting, scalic theme. And finally, the exposition will often end with a codetta. A codetta literally means a small coda, so it offers a sense of finality, but not too much finality. It only wants to close off the section, not the whole piece. And the codetta will firmly close the music in our second key. So here it closes the exposition in B flat major, but Mozart gives us a reminder of the first theme. Often the whole exposition is repeated, and this is the case with this Mozart piece. Some people think the repeat is important because it gives the music the right sense of proportion, others ignore the repeats because they can make the piece go on a bit. Next comes the development, and this is a point of major interest in the piece, where the composer can run free and do crazy and creative things with their ideas. So the point is to develop the material we've already been exposed to. Importantly, it will generally completely avoid going into either of the main keys we heard in the exposition. Instead, it'll probably go through a wide range of keys and be reluctant to settle on any of them. Apart from this, there are no real rules for the development section, and different composers will do things very differently. So, in a sense, if the exposition is more clearly structured, the development allows things to be more chaotic and unstructured. One thing you'll generally find is that the themes will be broken up and then rebuilt or recombined to make new phrases or sequences of a different kind. Here's a clip from Mozart's development. Listen to how it's constantly changing key, reluctant to settle in any, and how it's breaking up and rebuilding the material we heard from the exposition. Finally, of course, the development has to bring us back to the home tonic for the start of the recapitulation. So the development section will typically end with an amazing passage of dominant preparation. This moment can often be a high point of tension and climax in the piece, especially with later composers. Mozart uses this dominant preparation to shower us with classical thunder. One last note, in a few cases, like Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, the composer might also introduce a new important theme in the development section. I consider this an expansion of sonata form, rather than traditional sonata form, but it does add an extra dimension to the structure. Next comes the recapitulation. The point of this is to recap the two groups of the exposition, at least to some extent. However, there are always surprising twists. Some of these will be subtle, like a change in the way they use their instruments or dynamics or something. However, other changes are more significant. So it's not an exact repeat of the exposition, but more a kind of retelling of it in a slightly different way. The two groups don't have to be stated in their entirety. In fact, it's actually more important to state the second group fully than the first, because the second group's recap will no longer be in its original key, but in the home tonic. So the conflict that was set up in the exposition is in some sense resolved in the recapitulation. There are 3 points of major interest in the recapitulation, which give license for the composer to do something amazing. First is how the development leads into the recap, which we've already looked at. The second interesting part is the transition. Whereas in the exposition, the transition took us to our new key, now the composer has to rewrite this passage to keep us in the home key. And the composer will often use this as an excuse to do something remarkable. Here's a bit of Mozart's redesigned dramatic transition, which takes the old transition material and runs wild with it. The third interesting part is really the second group and how the composer will alter the second group, if he alters it at all. Here, Mozart changes the key from B flat major to G minor. It would have been perfectly acceptable to just go to G major, that's allowed in sonata form, but Mozart takes it a step further and makes it minor, which completely changes the character of the theme to something more tragic. So it's a crucial moment in terms of the mood of the piece. The argument has resolved itself into tragedy, not positivity. This has become this. Finally, there's the coda, which gives a solid ending to the piece. There are many possibilities, and the objective is to wrap up the movement and give it a sense of finality, ending in the home key. Mozart keeps it fairly simple and dramatically effective. Sometimes a composer might decide to depart from the home tonic and use the energy of the coda to find their way back again. Here's my favourite example of that, where Beethoven is in his home key at the end of the recap, and then shoots himself in the foot. And then he shoots himself again, apparently with a machine gun, and then he has to find his way back home again. So that, in total, is our sonata form, and it's one of the most brilliant ways to develop a musical argument, which great composers have been using for generations. I hope you enjoyed this video, and there will definitely be more like this coming up, as well as analyses of great pieces of classical and film music. So please do subscribe if you want to see more, and share this video if you like it. Thanks for watching.
I think Warwick had a really good question, and I wanted to address it with everybody. Warwick, I'll tell you right now that I don't know the answer to this, but I will definitely defer to our home expert on this. And if I haven't said this before, Michael has tons of knowledge on all of this stuff, and I will absolutely defer to him on a bunch of this stuff. But the idea as to, does a composer know I'm doing this on purpose? The answer to that would be, to me, what I understand and what I've read that people do is the same process as Hemingway may have had. There's a story, and he knows that he wants to develop it. There's something that he wants to do, and he works it and works it and works it until he presents it in the way that is logical, at least to him. And that's just it. Is that they kind of chew on this stuff until they have a sense of this is where I think that this is going. But many of them actually let the story lead them. And this is what happens with and you can even see, I mean, people tell you about Mozart was a different story, because Mozart was just different. But people like Beethoven, who really worked at it and went at it hard. He had an idea, and a lot of times, you can kind of hear him, questioning himself sometimes in it, and then finding an answer, which is kind of like what he said about the key signatures later. Shot himself in the foot, but eventually he found his way back, and that's a really interesting way to look at it. Mike, do you have anything to add to any of that?
Well, they would have studied their predecessors, and so when you're talking about the classical era through the Romantic era, they would have you know, it all would have really started with pretty much Haydn. He wrote his symphonies in that form, and essentially everybody else kind of followed and did the same form, but would add their own touches to it and would start expanding on the form. And as the guy in the video said, you know, take advantage of, you know, doing different things like shooting yourself in the foot to kind of go off and vary and do different things. So
106 symphonies.
Well, officially 104 that were published, and then they keep finding new ones every so often. So I think it's actually probably up around 110 or so. I'm not even sure how many they've found after that. But.
He wrote a little bit of music, just
Yeah.
a little bit.
Well, he worked for a Prince Esterhazy, and most of his writing was done in the summer when the Prince was in his summer estate. And the Prince would every so often have a big party with a bunch of dignitaries, and he would tell Haydn, "You got to have a new piece for the party. Period. That's your job." And he did a lot of these parties, so he had to do it fairly often.
It's super interesting, and the creative process, you know, where you see all of these guys and women over the course of centuries that have just worked their craft. It's actually super cool to actually see and hear. So I have one more for you tonight, and it's really one of my favorite symphonies because the trumpet has a prominent role in it. So I'm gonna force you to listen to trumpet music, but it's by one of the most amazing symphonic composers, and I just want to listen to the first movement. If I were going to play the whole symphony, it would actually take a longer time. But I do encourage you to actually listen to the whole symphony. The adagietto that symphony has is one of the, I would say that it's the most beautiful thing ever written. And not because it has trumpets. As a matter of fact, the adagietto does not have any trumpet in it. But when you get to that and you just listen to the way that this guy actually wrote a soft. Anyway, it's really, if you've ever actually listened to the symphony, every time that you listen to it and go deeper into it, because you'll find so much material in there that it's pretty amazing. This is Mahler's Fifth Symphony, the first movement. It's not an exact sonata allegro because he kind of changes things because Mahler is Mahler. But one of the things that you'll see is that you'll see very, very clear. You'll see the distinction between the exposition and the development. He hits you with that development just like, you know, even though it's called Trauermarsch, which is a funeral march to begin with, it goes from a funeral march to a roller coaster ride, like right away. And you can kind of feel that distinction, and he does it in such a way that you just kind of go, holy cow. And from then on, then everything, pretty much everything that he does in that development section, you hear echoes of it throughout the whole symphony, all the way through. So it's a whole plot that he's actually laying out for you. It's just fantastic. This guy was just absolutely amazing. So it takes 12 minutes, so we're exactly right on it. Okay, so we might be done at 9:31 or something like that. But that's it's my favorite symphony, conducted by my favorite conductor, Claudio Abbado. And so check this out, or check this out. Let me see. Where was it? And then here. And then, oh yeah, when it's time to relax, it's Mahler time. If you want to get the score to this, well, I was gonna. It's gonna take too much time for me to do that. But the score is in here if you ever wanted to look at it, and you'd get lost because it's in manuscript anyway. So let's listen.